and welcome back to Vinyl Friday, where, with great dedication to our cause, we continue our dissection of Rubber Soul. What, this? Oh, it's nothing. I was just pretending to be a psychoanalyst before, and I thought I looked rather fly in this blazer and decided to keep it on, so we get fancy Nancy for Vinyl Friday this week. This is our 9th week of Vinyl Friday, and you'll remember we're doing off weeks, so next week will not be a Beatles week, but never fear, the week after will be. That means that today we'll be listening to this song. Is there anybody going to listen to my story? Girl. Track 2, side 2. This is a really interesting song to me. I've always felt like it was the sister song to Michelle. These are words that go together well. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this one in the last week because it sounds like something so specific, and yet it sounds like something that is entirely its own. I've been trying to hone in on what it is that makes it sound like so many other things. So I'll try and break that down today. Then maybe we'll dig into some of John Lennon's neuroses and work through the lyrics of the piece as well. Before we do though, I just want to look at how immensely beautiful the verses of this song are. If you take another song on this album like Drive My Car for instance, beep, 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 yeah. That song will repeat its chords, so it goes. So it's that, don't get what you want it to be, she said baby can't you see? It repeats, or like, you won't see me. You won't see me. When I call you up, your line's engaged, I have had enough, so act your age. It's repetitive. It's still good, but it's repetitive, whereas this one does this in the verses. Before it repeats. So there's a lot of chords happening there, there's a lot going on. I think the other thing that makes these chords quite beautiful is basically every key has a family of chords that fit within that key and are sort of supposed to go together in a song, but they're called modes if you're interested to learn more. For instance, in this key, C minor, the corresponding G chord should also be minor. Just trust me on this. I won't get into why, but G minor is within that same family. So it's meant to go, is there anybody going to listen to my story? But instead they go here. Going to listen to... I think it makes it much more compelling. It makes you feel intrigued to hear what the story is because it's not going to be so bleak. It's going to be colorful. That is a big part of what makes this so pretty. The melody is also very, very nice. Especially this. It actually sounds kind of like the intro to Bungalow Bill. But it's got that. Editor's note, this is a really common scale that shows up in a lot of different families of music globally, including Arabic music, Spanish music, Hebrew music, Nagila, Balkan music, and Indian music, among many others. That's a lot of what I find attractive in this song. That particular chord, that melody, it gives it a very mysterious, exotic element. It's quite lovely. So I sort of went down a rabbit hole of different musical genres trying to land on exactly what was in this song's DNA, and I'm not sure if I actually achieved anything, but let's together find the reason that I went to sleep way too late last night. First thing that I could identify is that there was a little bit of Greek in this song. According to Paul, the refrain at the end here my suit. Apparently that little refrain was something that Paul McCartney wrote while he was on holiday in Greece. It has that sort of Zorba the Greek lilt to it. And actually it reminds me a lot of the instrumentation in this Cat Stevens song. he was Greek, so that sort of influence shows up in his music as well. On that European theme, we sort of touched briefly on that scale that you can find in a lot of Eastern European musics, but also it's got this like German two-step oompa thing that's going on. Oompa. Like, if the chords were different, it would feel like you were at Oktoberfest. I think this also belongs to a family of musical genres that are based around theatricality. So again, in that European theme, things like cabaret and burlesque. Here's a song from the musical Cabaret.
Farewell, my liebe Herr.
Do you see some of the similarities? But also in a more British tradition, something like music hall. Basically, there were variety shows that were put on in these big music halls. They had a range of different performers, circusy things, dancers, the Victorian equivalent to a stand-up comedian, and they had a lot of these sing-along songs that would have like a storytelling verse and then a chorus that everyone could sing along to.
Following in father's footsteps, following me dear old dad. He's just in front with a fine big gal, so I thought I'd have one.
In all of these musics, there is an element of introducing or inviting the listener to participate in the song, whether it's to listen to a story that's being told or to sing along with it. This song is a really, really good example of that because it opens with, "Is there anybody going to listen to my story?" Straight out the gate, he's announcing, "I'm telling a story. Please have a seat." On the subject of circus music and theatricality, it feels like a portent of what was to come a few years later.
Is there anybody going to listen to my story?
For the benefit of Mr. Kite, there will be a show tonight on trampoline.
Although it predated the Beatles by a good number of years, Paul's father was in bands that played this sort of like traditional music, these sing-along songs that were born out of that music hall tradition. And so you hear that woven throughout all of the Beatles canon and actually throughout Paul McCartney's career in particular. John used to call them Paul's grandma songs. As much as John made fun of Paul for it, you can hear that he does draw on these traditional forms of music as well, whether or not it's intentional. In my experience writing music, you don't always know what's going to come, you just have to be receptive to it when it arrives. So I assume that's the same with John Lennon, that he just sat down and wrote things and didn't go, you know what? I'm going to draw from the music hall tradition today. Just quickly out of interest, this sort of genre of music never really died. Somewhere around the 80s it morphed into something called dark cabaret or gothic circus, but mostly dark cabaret, and it's still alive and well. So there's something, I think, universally appealing about this kind of almost mischievous, mysterious, exotic music with a storytelling element to it. It makes you feel like you're a part of something, which I touched on last week. Humans really love that. Last couple of things I'd like to mention about the music. The backing vocal here. I always thought it was do 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 when I was a kid, and I was wrong. We will be taking today's reading from the good book. John Lennon says, "We've always done dirty little things on records. In Girl, the Beatles were singing tit 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 in the background, and nobody noticed."
Incidentally, here's a picture of a cool mushroom that I found while on an outdoorsy jaunt.
My question this week is about this here. What do you think that's there for? I know it was very deliberate because they had to mic it up, especially at John's request, and record it and overdub it and insert it specifically into the song. He didn't just sing it that way. Some people have said that it's an obvious Doobylicious reference because they were doing a lot of that at the time. Some people say that it's like a huff of exasperation. I've seen people who say that it's like a sharp intake of breath to indicate desire. What's your interpretation? What does that hiss in the song mean to you? Let's move on to the titular girl. Did you find that hilarious? Because I found that hilarious. There are some lines in this song that I find kind of troubling. Here are some of those lines. "She's the kind of girl you want so much it makes you sorry. When I think of all the times I tried so hard to leave her, she will turn to me and start to cry. And she promises the earth to me and I believe her after all this time I don't know why. She's the kind of girl who puts you down when friends are there you feel a fool." Concerning. In order to break this down a little bit more, let's play a quick round of Armchair Psychologist. Now, Mr. Lennon, let's begin with your relationship with your father. How would you describe your relationship with your father? My father? He skipped town shortly after I was born. So you were raised by your mother? Sort of, until she was deemed unfit and I was taken into the care of my aunt and uncle. Did you feel that you had found a stable father figure in your uncle? Oh, he was great, but he died shortly after I moved in. Ah. Going back to your mother, did your relationship with her develop over time? Well, she actually sort of re-entered my life when I was in my teens, and she taught me how to play chords on her banjo and her ukulele. And how do you find this relationship now? Oh no, she died not long after that. Oh dear. Perhaps we should move on to your schooling. Did you develop any meaningful relationships with your school chums? Yeah, I had a great friend named Stuart Sutcliffe. Oh, good. Yes. Tell me more. He and I were like brothers. He died a few years later. And how did all of this make you feel? Codependent. So John Lennon's formative years were just like an avalanche of unending abandonment. Every time he formed a close relationship with someone, with the exception of his aunt and Paul, basically, they were taken from him. Obviously, without some sort of intervention, that's gonna turn into a kind of pathology. I remember as a kid listening to this song and thinking that the woman who's being described is kind of an awful person. I didn't realize until years later that John Lennon said, "Girl is real. There's no such thing as the girl. She was a dream." It wasn't just a song, it was about that girl, the one that a lot of us were looking for. So he was writing about his ideal, not a villain. And when you take into account all of the hardship that he had faced as a young person, it makes sense that he would want to cling to someone if he felt closeness to them. Because, like, if you were in his shoes, you'd be terrified that that person was going to leave you in one way or another, emotionally or physically. So it sounds like his ideal relationship that he's singing about is not one built on trust and love necessarily, but rather on, like, compulsion and an almost obsessive attraction. It's interesting to me that he says that he later found this woman in Yoko because, as you would expect, he clung to her as if his life depended on it, and they were inseparable, and he took her to the recording studio and everyone was mightily upset about it. Having said that, I don't think that she broke up the Beatles. I think that they were four maturing adults who decided that they no longer wanted to be in each other's pockets and they wanted space to explore their individual creativity. And the end. That's it for me. If you would like to support any of my unusual endeavors, be it impersonating psychologists or the singular clarity of my creative vision as a solo artist, I will leave a link in the description and you are welcome to make a donation if you wish, but no pressure. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you here next week. Have a great weekend! Sort of, until she was... Get your butt out of my face!